My daughter hid her face when I walked into her office party, but the CEO rushed over and announced, "Our mystery investor is here." Her colleagues gasped. They finally discovered who funded their jobs. The moment I stepped through the glass doors of Technova's annual holiday party, I saw my daughter Sarah literally dive behind a potted plant, her designer heels clicking frantically against the marble floor as she tried to make herself invisible. 23 years I had raised this girl on my own after breast cancer stole her father from us when she was just 6 months old, and this was how she greeted her mother at her company party. The hurt that shot through my chest was sharper than any physical pain I had ever experienced. But before I could even process what was happening, Marcus Chen, the CEO of the company, came rushing across the room with his arms spread wide and a smile that could have lit up Times Square. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced in a voice that carried across the entire 40th floor of the Manhattan high-rise, "our mystery angel investor has finally graced us with her presence. Please welcome Miranda Sterling, the woman who made all of this possible." The champagne glass in Sarah's hand slipped and shattered on the floor, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent room like a gunshot. Every head in that party turned to stare at me, then at Sarah, then back at me again, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock to something that looked like awe. I stood there in my simple black dress, the same one I had worn to every business meeting for the past 15 years. The one Sarah had laughed at just last week when she saw it hanging in my closet, calling it something her grandmother would wear to church in the 1950s. My hand instinctively went to the pearl necklace around my neck, the last gift her father had given me before the cancer took him, the same necklace she had suggested. I retire because it made me look like I was trying to. Hard to look rich when I clearly wasn't. The irony of that statement was not lost on me now as I watched my daughter's face turn from red to white to a shade of green that suggested she might need to find a bathroom very quickly. "Sarah," whispered the woman, who had been unsuccessfully trying to hide my daughter behind her back. A tall blonde in a cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Your mother is Miranda Sterling? The Miranda Sterling who owns 40% of our company? The woman who single-handedly saved us from bankruptcy before we even launched?" The questions came out in a rush, each one making Sarah shrink further into herself. And I watched as my daughter, my brilliant, confident daughter who had graduated summa cum laude from MIT and could code circles around programmers twice her age, became smaller and smaller under the weight of her own shame. Marcus Chen, bless his enthusiastic heart, seemed completely oblivious to the family drama unfolding before him as he took my arm and began leading me through the crowd of stunned employees. "Ms. Sterling, I cannot tell you how honored we are that you finally decided to attend one of our events. In 3 years of partnership, this is the first time you've graced us with your presence, and on such a special night too. We're announcing the IPO next week. As you know from the board meetings you attend virtually, but having you here in person, well, it's just incredible." He was practically bouncing with excitement. This 35-year-old wunderkind who had built a company from nothing but an idea and a laptop in his garage, not knowing that the only reason his company existed at all was because I had seen something in his vision that reminded me of the fire I had once seen in my own daughter's eyes when she talked about changing the world through technology. I let Marcus lead me through the crowd, smiling politely as employees introduced themselves, each one stumbling over their words as they tried to process that the mysterious investor they had speculated about for years was standing in front of them in a dress from Target and shoes from Payless. I heard whispers following in our wake like ripples on water. "She looks so normal. I thought she'd be younger. Sarah never mentioned her mother was loaded. Wait, Sarah didn't know?" That last one came from James in accounting, a young man with thick glasses who I recognized from the employee files I reviewed quarterly, though he had no idea I knew his name, his performance reviews, or that I had personally approved his promotion 6 months ago. "Mom?" Sarah finally managed to croak out, emerging from behind her human shield with all the enthusiasm of someone walking to their own execution. "I didn't. I thought you were at your book club tonight. You said you were going to discuss that mystery novel with the ladies from church." Book club. That's what she thought I did with my Thursday evenings. Not reviewing financial reports from the 7 companies in my portfolio, not conducting virtual board meetings with CEOs across the country, not managing the $87 million fortune I had built from scratch while she was sleeping in her crib. believing her mother was just another widow trying to make ends meet on Social Security and her late husband's life insurance. The truth was, I had started my first business when Sarah was 3 years old, selling handmade jewelry online while she napped, reinvesting every penny into learning about e-commerce, digital marketing, and eventually angel investing. By the time she started kindergarten, I had turned that little jewelry business into a thriving online retailer that I sold for $2 million, which I immediately reinvested into 3 startups that reminded me of my own hunger, my own drive to prove that a widow with a baby could be more than a statistic. One of those startups was a revolutionary baby food company that sold to Gerber for $20 million. Another was a female-focused fitness app that Under Armour acquired for $35 million. The third was a disaster that taught me more about due diligence than any success ever could have. But Sarah never knew any of this because I had made a conscious decision to keep my business life completely separate from my life as her mother. I incorporated everything under my maiden name, Miranda Sterling instead of Miranda Phillips, the name she knew me by. I attended every school play in my mom jeans and oversized sweaters, baked cookies for PTA meetings, and drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic that made embarrassing noises when it started. I wanted Sarah to grow up understanding the value of hard work, to appreciate every dollar, to build her own success without the shadow of mine looming over her. I wanted her to be proud of her achievements knowing they were hers alone, not handed to her because of who her mother was. And she had succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, graduating at the top of her class, landing internships at Google and Apple, and finally taking a chance on this startup where she had quickly risen to lead developer. I had been so proud when Marcus Chen called me personally to say he wanted to hire my daughter, not knowing that I had specifically instructed him to evaluate her purely on merit, to give her no special treatment, to not even hint that there was any connection between us. He had hired her because she was brilliant, promoted her because she was dedicated, and praised her because she had earned it. Everything she had achieved at Teknova was hers and hers alone, and I had watched from the shadows, bursting with pride at every milestone. But then something had started to change about 6 months ago. Sarah had begun making comments about my appearance, suggesting I update my wardrobe, maybe get highlights in my graying hair, trade in my Honda for something less embarrassing. She started meeting me for lunch at restaurants far from her office, and when I suggested picking her up from work one rainy evening, she had asked me to wait 2 blocks away so her colleagues wouldn't see my car. The final straw had been last month when she threw a birthday party and invited everyone from her office, her gym, even her barista from the coffee shop she frequented, but told me it would be too crowded and suggested we celebrate separately, just the 2 of us the next day, standing in that glittering office party now, watching my daughter squirm under the curious gazes of her colleagues. I realized that she hadn't been protecting me from judgment. She had been protecting herself from being associated with someone she perceived as ordinary, unsuccessful, and embarrassing, the mother who had sacrificed everything to give her a normal childhood, who had hidden an empire to let her build her own, had become someone she was ashamed to be seen with in public. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. Marcus was still talking, leading me toward a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the Manhattan skyline, the lights twinkling like earthbound stars. "This is the office we've kept reserved for you since day one, Ms. Sterling. I know you prefer to work remotely, but we've always hoped that one day you might want to have a physical presence here. Sarah, did you know about this?" He turned to my daughter, who was trailing behind us like a scolded puppy, and I saw her shake her head mutely, her eyes fixed on the nameplate that had been sitting on the desk for 2 years. Miranda Sterling, founding investor. Sarah didn't know about any of this, I said calmly, settling into the executive chair behind the desk as if I had been sitting in such chairs my entire life, which unbeknownst to my daughter I had been for the past 20 years. I specifically requested that my investment remain anonymous to all employees, including her. I wanted her to succeed on her own merits, without any whispers of nepotism or special treatment. And she has succeeded, Marcus. Every achievement, every promotion, every accolade she's earned has been entirely her own. I'm very proud of what she's accomplished here. Sarah's face crumpled at my words, and I saw tears beginning to form in her eyes, but I wasn't finished yet. There were things that needed to be said, truths that needed to be exposed, and we had already come this far. The cat, as they say, was well and truly out of the bag, and there was no point in trying to stuff it back in now. What I'm less proud of, I continued, my voice still calm but with an edge that made Marcus shift uncomfortably, is the person she's become outside of work. The person who's ashamed to be seen with her mother because she drives an old car and shops at discount stores. The person who hides me from her friends because I might embarrass her with my outdated clothes and my simple lifestyle. Mom, that's not. I was trying to protect you. Sarah burst out, her voice cracking with emotion. These people, they're different from us. They judge everything. They care about status and connections and money. I didn't want them to look down on you. I didn't want you to feel small or inadequate around them. I was protecting you from their snobbery and their shallow values. The words came out in a rush, and I could see she believed them. Had convinced herself that her behavior had been noble somehow. Protective rather than cruel. I stood up from the chair and walked around the desk to face my daughter directly, taking in her designer dress that probably cost $2,000, her shoes that cost even more, the handbag that I knew had a 5-figure price tag because I had seen the credit card statement she didn't know I monitored, not to spy but to ensure she wasn't getting into financial trouble, trying to keep up with a lifestyle she couldn't afford. No, Sarah, I said quietly. You were protecting yourself from being seen as ordinary. From being associated with someone you thought was nobody special. You forgot that being your mother was the most special thing I ever chose to be. The room had gone completely silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioning and the muted sounds of the city 40 floors below. Marcus had backed away, sensing this was a conversation he shouldn't be part of, but I held up a hand to stop him from leaving. Stay, Marcus. You're part of this story whether you know it or not. I pulled out my phone and opened the portfolio app I checked every morning, turning the screen towards Sarah. 7 companies, including Teknova, combined value as of market close today, $87.3 million. Every investment I made was in companies that reminded me of you somehow. Tech startups run by young people who were told they couldn't succeed, who were underestimated, who needed someone to believe in them the way I believed in you. Sarah sank into one of the leather chairs facing the desk, her legs seemingly unable to hold her up anymore. 87 million? She whispered, her voice so faint I could barely hear it. But you clip coupons. You shop at Walmart. You've been wearing the same winter coat for 10 years. I thought Dad's life insurance ran out years ago. I thought you were living on Social Security. I've been sending you money every month because I thought you needed it. I couldn't help but laugh at that, a genuine laugh that seemed to break some of the tension in the room. And I've been putting every penny of that money into a trust fund for your future children, adding to it with interest. It's worth about $50,000 now, thanks to your generosity and some smart investing. I moved to sit in the chair next to her, close enough to touch but not reaching out. Not yet. Sarah, I chose to live simply not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because I learned early on that money doesn't define your worth, that success isn't measured in designer labels or luxury cars, that the most valuable things in life can't be bought. Your father understood that, I continued, my hand going again to the pearl necklace he had given me. He was a teacher, made $40,000 a year and was the richest man I ever knew because he understood what really mattered. When he got sick, he made me promise to raise you with those same values, to teach you that character matters more than cash, that integrity is worth more than income. And for 23 years I thought I had succeeded in that. Until recently, when I watched you become someone who judges worth by appearance, who's embarrassed by simplicity, who values image over authenticity. Sarah was crying now, really crying. Not the pretty tears you see in movies, but the ugly, snotty kind that comes from genuine remorse and shame. I'm so sorry, Mom, she sobbed, her carefully applied makeup running in rivers down her cheeks. I don't know how I became this person. I got caught up in this world in trying to fit in trying to be someone important. I forgot everything you taught me. I forgot who I really am. Marcus cleared his throat gently and we both turned to look at him. If I may, he said carefully, I think there's something else Sarah should know. Ms. Sterling, you didn't just invest money in Teknova. You've been our strategic advisor from day one. Half of our breakthrough innovations came from your suggestions in board meetings. The mentorship program that's become our signature recruiting tool, that was your idea. The flexible work policy that's made us one of the best places to work in tech, also you. Sarah, your mother isn't just an investor. She's the reason this company exists and thrives. I watched as this new information hit my daughter like a physical blow. She had been so proud of her company, of its culture and innovation, not knowing that her mother had been shaping it from the shadows all along. "But there's something you should know too, Marcus," I said, turning to the young CEO. Every suggestion I made, every innovation I proposed, was based on things Sarah had told me over dinner conversations. Her frustrations with previous employers became our solutions. Her ideas about work-life balance became our policies. She didn't know I was listening so carefully. Didn't know I was taking notes after she went to bed. Didn't know that she was indirectly shaping the company she would eventually work for. So you see, the innovation you credit me with really came from her. I was just the conduit. The office door opened and several employees peered in, clearly curious about what was happening with their mysterious investor and their colleague who had apparently been hiding a massive secret. Rebecca from HR, the woman who had tried to hide Sarah earlier, stepped forward hesitantly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but people are asking, should we continue with the party? The announcement about the IPO?" She looked between the three of us uncertainly, clearly unsure of the protocol for this unprecedented situation. I stood up, smoothing down my simple black dress, and made a decision. The party should absolutely continue. This is a celebration of all your hard work, and you deserve to enjoy it. But if you don't mind, I'd like to say something to everyone first. Marcus nodded eagerly, and we all moved back to the main party area, where the entire company had gathered, their faces a mix of curiosity, excitement, and confusion. "Good evening, everyone," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the space. "My name is Miranda Sterling, and as Marcus mentioned, I'm an investor in Technova. But more importantly, I'm Sarah Phillips's mother." I saw Sarah flinch at the public acknowledgement, but I continued. "I want to clear up any confusion and set the record straight. Sarah did not know about my involvement with this company. She was hired, promoted, and recognized based entirely on her own merits. She's a brilliant developer and a natural leader, and everything she's achieved here has been earned through her own hard work and talent. But I also want to apologize," I continued, and I saw surprise ripple through the crowd. "I've put my daughter in an impossible position by hiding my identity. She's been living two separate lives without knowing it. One as the talented developer you all know and respect, and another as the daughter of someone she thought was a simple widow living on a fixed income. That deception, while well-intentioned, has caused pain and confusion, and for that, I'm deeply sorry. However," I said, my voice growing stronger, "I'm not sorry for the lesson it's taught both of us. Sarah has learned that the people we dismiss as ordinary might be extraordinary in ways we never imagined, and I've learned that protecting our children from the truth doesn't always protect them from becoming someone we didn't intend to raise. We've both learned that authentic relationships require honesty, that real success isn't about image or perception, and that the most valuable investments aren't always financial." I looked directly at my daughter then, seeing her mascara-streaked face and red eyes, but also seeing something else. Understanding. Maybe even the beginning of forgiveness. "Sarah, you asked me earlier why I didn't tell you the truth. The real answer is fear. I was afraid that if you knew about the money, you'd lose your drive, your ambition, your hunger to succeed. I was afraid you'd become entitled or lazy or cruel. Instead, by hiding it, I turned you into someone who judges worth by the wrong metrics, who's ashamed of simplicity, who values appearance over substance. I created the very problem I was trying to avoid, just from a different direction. The room was so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Every eye fixed on us, this unexpected mother-daughter drama playing out in the middle of their holiday party. But I wasn't done yet. There were still things that needed to be said, truths that needed to be exposed to the light. When your father was dying," I continued, my voice catching slightly on the memory, "he made me promise to raise you to be kind, humble, and hardworking. He said those were the only riches that really mattered. For most of your life, Sarah, you embodied those values. You volunteered at homeless shelters in high school, tutored underprivileged kids in college, and chose this startup over lucrative offers from bigger companies because you believed in the mission. Somewhere along the way, you lost sight of those values, and I blame myself for that." "No," Sarah said suddenly, standing up and facing the crowd herself. "No, Mom, you don't get to take the blame for my choices. I'm 23 years old, not a child. I chose to become someone who cared more about appearances than authenticity. I chose to hide my mother from my colleagues because I was embarrassed by her ordinary appearance. I chose to value the wrong things, and that's on me, not on you. She turned to face her colleagues, her chin raised despite her ruined makeup and tear-stained face. All of you have met the real me over the past 2 years. Ambitious, driven, maybe a little too focused on success. But you haven't met the me that my mother raised, the one who knows that kindness matters more than achievement. That character counts more than credentials. I lost that person for a while, but I'm going to find her again. James from accounting raised his hand tentatively, like we were in a classroom. If I may ask, Mrs. Sterling, why Technova? Out of all the companies you could have invested in, why this one? It was a good question, one that went to the heart of everything. I smiled at him, recognizing the sharp intelligence that had earned him his recent promotion. Because Marcus reminded me of Sarah's father, I said simply. A brilliant mind with a teacher's heart, someone who wanted to build something that would help others learn and grow. The educational technology you're developing here, the platforms that will make quality education accessible to kids who could never afford it otherwise, that's exactly the kind of thing my husband would have supported. Every child deserves the chance to learn regardless of their economic circumstances. That's why I invested, and that's why I've stayed invested even when other opportunities promised better returns. Marcus stepped forward then, his face glowing with pride and something that looked like renewed purpose. That mission is why we're going public, he announced to the room. Not to cash out, but to scale up. With the IPO funds, we're going to provide our platform free to every Title I school in America. No child should be denied education because of their zip code or their parents' bank account. The room erupted in applause, the kind that comes from people who genuinely believe in what they're doing, and I felt a surge of pride not just for the company, but for all these young people who were choosing mission over money. As the applause died down, Rebecca from HR approached me hesitantly. Miss Sterling, I owe you an apology. Earlier when you arrived, I helped Sarah hide because she seemed panicked. I didn't know. I thought you were maybe someone problematic, an estranged relative or something. I'm sorry for my assumption. I reached out and touched her arm gently. You were being a good friend, protecting someone you thought needed protection. There's no need to apologize for loyalty and kindness. Those are qualities that are far too rare in this world. The party gradually resumed around us, though with a different energy now, charged with revelation and possibility. Sarah and I found ourselves in a quieter corner, sitting on one of the modern couches that probably cost more than my entire living room set. Mom, she said quietly, that money you've been saving from what I send you, the trust fund for my future kids, I don't deserve that. I don't deserve any of this. I took her hand then, feeling the familiar calluses from her coding work, the same hands that used to fit entirely in my palm when she was small. Deserving isn't the point, sweetheart. Love isn't earned or deserved. It's given freely. That's what makes it love. But I need to earn it back, she insisted, her jaw set in that stubborn way she'd had since she was 2 years old and decided she didn't like peas. I need to prove that I can be the person you raised me to be, not this shallow, image-obsessed person I've become. I squeezed her hand gently. Then prove it, but not to me. Prove it to yourself. Start by apologizing to the people you've wronged in your pursuit of image. Start by returning those ridiculously expensive clothes and donating the money to charity. Start by driving that old Honda of mine with pride instead of shame. Start by remembering that every person you meet has value beyond what you can see on the surface. She nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her free hand. Will you teach me? About investing, I mean. Not because I want the money, but because I want to understand how you think, how you see potential where others see risk. I smiled at that, remembering the little girl who used to beg me to teach her everything from cooking to gardening, to fixing the leaky faucet in our old apartment. I'll teach you, but not about investing. I'll teach you about people, about looking beyond presentations to see potential, about understanding that the best investments aren't in companies but in human beings and their dreams. As the evening wore on, I found myself surrounded by Sarah's colleagues, all eager to hear stories about the company's early days, about the decisions that had shaped their workplace, about the vision for the future, but I deflected most of their questions back to them, asking about their projects, their dreams, their frustrations. I took mental notes, already thinking about the next board meeting, the suggestions I would make based on their feedback. Sarah watched me work the room, and I could see her beginning to understand that networking wasn't about impressing people with your status, but about genuinely connecting with them as human beings. Around 10 o'clock, as the party was winding down, Marcus pulled me aside. "Mrs. Sterling, I have to ask, why reveal yourself now? You've been content to be anonymous for 3 years. What changed?" I looked across the room at Sarah, who was helping the catering staff clean up, having kicked off her expensive heels to make the work easier. "My daughter was losing herself," I said simply. "She was becoming someone her father wouldn't recognize, someone I didn't recognize. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give your child is the truth, even when that truth is painful." She needed to know that the mother she was ashamed of was the same person funding the success she was so proud of. She needed to see the irony of that, the wrongness of it. "And did it work?" Marcus asked, following my gaze to Sarah. "Ask me in a year," I replied. "Change doesn't happen overnight. She'll stumble, probably rebel against it, maybe even resent me for a while. But the seed has been planted. She knows now that value isn't determined by appearance, that success isn't measured in dollars, that the most ordinary-looking people might be extraordinary. That's all I can do, plant the seed and hope it grows." As we prepared to leave, Sarah insisted on driving me home in her BMW, but I shook my head. "No, we're taking the Honda, and you're driving." She looked at me in surprise, but I held out the keys. "It's time you remembered where you came from, what real life looks like for most people. That car has 200,000 miles on it. Makes weird noises and smells faintly of the coffee I spilled last week. It's also paid for, reliable, and gets us where we need to go. That's all a car really needs to do." The drive home was quiet at first, Sarah struggling with the stick shift she hadn't driven in years, wincing every time the engine made one of its characteristic groans. But as we got farther from Manhattan, heading toward my modest suburban home, she began to relax, even laughing when the car backfired at a stoplight. "I learned to drive in this car," she said suddenly, her voice soft with memory. "You taught me in the high school parking lot, remember? I was so scared I was going to crash it, and you said it didn't matter because it was already ugly." We both laughed at the memory, and for a moment, it felt like we were back there, mother and daughter, without all the complications that money and success had brought. When we pulled into my driveway, Sarah looked at the small ranch house with new eyes. "This is where you run an $87 million portfolio from?" she asked, incredulous. "This is where you attend board meetings and make decisions that affect hundreds of employees?" I nodded, getting out of the car and heading toward the front door. "This is where I raised you, where your father and I built our life together, where every important moment of our family happened. Why would I want to work anywhere else?" Inside, I showed her my office for the first time. Really showed it to her. Not just the surface she'd seen when dropping by, but the hidden depths. Behind what looked like a simple bookshelf was a state-of-the-art computer setup. Multiple monitors displaying real-time market data, financial reports, and video conferencing equipment that rivaled any Fortune 500 boardroom. "This is where the magic happens," I said, gesturing to the setup. "But the real magic," I pointed to a corkboard covered in photos, "is here." The board was covered with pictures of Sarah at every age, from baby photos to her college graduation, interspersed with printed emails from CEOs thanking me for my investment, photos of the other companies I'd helped build, and in the center, a photo of her father and me on our wedding day. "Everything I've built has been for you," I explained, tracing a finger over a photo of Sarah at age 5, dressed as a CEO for career day at kindergarten. "Not the money, that's just paper and numbers. But the lesson that you can build something from nothing, that being underestimated is an advantage if you know how to use it. That true success is measured in the lives you touch, not the money you make. I wanted you to learn those lessons by watching me live them, not by preaching them at you. But somewhere along the way, I became so good at hiding the business side that you only saw the surface, and you started to believe the surface was all there." "Was?" Sarah picked up a framed document from my desk. "My first rejection letter from a bank that wouldn't give me a business loan because I was a single mother with no collateral." "You kept this?" she asked, reading the dismissive language about my unrealistic expectations and lack of business experience. "I keep all of them," I said, opening a filing cabinet to show her dozens of rejection letters, condescending emails, and dismissive reviews. "They remind me that other people's opinions of your potential don't determine your success. Every person who rejected me, who dismissed me, who underestimated me, They all made me stronger, more determined. They taught me that the only opinion that really matters is your own belief in yourself. We talked until 3 in the morning, sitting at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals over the years, drinking tea from the same chipped mugs we'd had since she was in middle school. I told her about every investment, every decision, every failure and success. She told me about her fears, her insecurities, the pressure she felt to be perfect, to fit in, to be someone worthy of respect in a world that seemed to value all the wrong things. We cried together, laughed together, and slowly began to rebuild the bridge that had been crumbling between us. "I have something for you," I said finally, pulling out a thick folder from a drawer. "This is your real inheritance, not money, but knowledge. Every lesson I've learned, every mistake I've made, every strategy that worked and didn't work. It's all here, but," I held it back as she reached for it, "you only get to read 1 page a day. Each page has a lesson and an assignment. Complete the assignment before you move to the next page. It will take you exactly 1 year to get through it all, and by the end you'll understand not just how to invest money, but how to invest in life." Sarah took the folder reverently, opening to the first page. The lesson was simple. Tomorrow, have a real conversation with someone you usually ignore. A janitor, a cashier, a bus driver. Ask them about their dreams, listen, really listen. Then write down what you learned about humanity. Not about them specifically, but about humanity in general. She looked up at me, understanding dawning in her eyes. "This isn't about investing at all, is it?" I smiled. "Everything is about investing, sweetheart. Every interaction, every relationship, every moment. You're either investing in something meaningful or you're wasting capital. Not financial capital, but human capital. Emotional capital. Spiritual capital. The money is easy once you understand that." Over the next few weeks, I watched Sarah transform. She returned the designer clothes, sold the BMW, and bought a used Toyota, moved from her luxury apartment to a modest place closer to work. Her colleagues were baffled at first, some even mocking her for downgrading, but she held her head high and explained that she was upgrading her values, not downgrading her lifestyle. She started bringing lunch from home in Tupperware containers, shopping at thrift stores, and most importantly, she started seeing people instead of positions. The security guard at Technova, whom she'd passed every day for 2 years without really noticing, turned out to be studying for his computer science degree at night. She began tutoring him, staying late to help him understand coding concepts. The cleaning lady who came through the offices each evening was supporting 3 grandchildren after her daughter died. Sarah organized a collection among the employees to help with school supplies and winter coats. The intern everyone ignored because he stuttered had brilliant ideas about user interface design. Sarah made sure his voice was heard in meetings, giving him time to express himself without pressure. 3 months after the party revelation, Sarah called me excitedly. "Mom, I did it. I found my first investment opportunity." She wasn't talking about a company or a stock, but about a person, a homeless veteran she'd met at the soup kitchen where she'd started volunteering, who had an idea for an app to help other veterans find resources. She'd connected him with Marcus, who was considering it for Technova's social impact incubator. He just needed someone to believe in him, to see past the surface, she said, and I could hear the joy in her voice. The same joy I felt every time I saw potential where others saw problems. The IPO happened on schedule, and Technova's stock soared on the first day of trading. My 40% stake was suddenly worth over $200 million, but I felt no different than I had the day before. Numbers on a screen, that's all it was. The real value was in what the company would do with its new resources. The millions of children who would get access to quality education, the teachers who would have better tools, the communities that would be transformed by knowledge. That was wealth that mattered. Sarah rang the opening bell at the stock exchange, and this time she insisted I stand right beside her, introduced me to everyone as her mother and her hero. The photos made the business news, the story of the mystery investor and her daughter going viral on social media. But we didn't care about the attention. What mattered was that we were there together. No hiding, no shame, just truth. 6 months after the revelation, Sarah had completed half of the lessons in the folder I'd given her. She'd learned to see potential in unexpected places, to value character over credentials, to understand that the best investments were in human beings and their dreams. She'd also fallen in love. Not with another tech executive or financial analyst, but with the veteran whose app idea she'd championed. He was rough around the edges, had struggled with PTSD, had been homeless for 2 years, but he had a brilliant mind and a generous heart. The old Sarah would have been embarrassed to be seen with him. The new Sarah was proud to stand beside him as he pitched his app to investors, wearing a suit from Goodwill and shoes from Payless just like her mother. "I'm scared, Mom," she admitted to me one evening as we sat on my back porch watching the sunset. "I'm scared I'll slip back into caring about the wrong things, that I'll lose myself again in trying to impress people who don't matter." I put my arm around her, pulling her close the way I had when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. "Fear is good," I told her. "It keeps you vigilant. The moment you stop being afraid of becoming that person again is the moment you're in danger of it happening. Stay scared, stay humble, stay real." A year after the party, we held another gathering, this time at my modest home. The entire Teknova team came, parking their Teslas and BMWs next to my ancient Honda, crowding into my small living room and spilling out into the backyard. We served hot dogs and hamburgers on paper plates, drank lemonade from a powder mix, and played cornhole in the backyard. It was the best party the company had ever had, everyone agreed, because it was real. No pretense, no posturing, just people being people. Marcus gave a speech that night, standing on my back deck with a beer in his hand and tears in his eyes. A year ago, I thought success meant expensive offices and designer suits and impressing the right people. Miranda and Sarah taught me that success means changing lives, building something that matters, and never forgetting where you came from. Our company is worth billions now, but our value isn't in our stock price. It's in the kids who are learning to code because of our platform, the teachers who can finally give their students the education they deserve, the communities we're transforming through technology. That's our real IPO, impact per opportunity. Sarah spoke next, and I watched my daughter command the attention of everyone there, not through power or position, but through authenticity and vulnerability. A year ago, I was so ashamed of my mother that I literally hid when she walked into our party. I thought she was nobody special, just an ordinary widow living an ordinary life. I was the fool who couldn't see that extraordinary isn't about what you wear or drive or own. It's about what you do with what you have. How you treat people when no one's watching, and whether you can look at yourself in the mirror and respect the person looking back. My mother is the most extraordinary person I know. Not because of her portfolio or her business acumen, but because she chose to let me fail and learn rather than cushioning me with wealth, chose to live simply when she could have lived lavishly, chose to invest in people's dreams rather than just profitable ventures. She paused, looking directly at me. "Mom, you asked me once why I was ashamed of you, and I gave you excuses about protecting you from judgment. The truth is uglier than that. I was ashamed because I had started measuring worth by the wrong metrics, and by those metrics, you didn't measure up. I couldn't see that the metrics were wrong, not you. You gave me a year to work through your lessons, and I did. But the most important lesson wasn't in that folder. It was in watching you live your values every single day, regardless of what anyone thought. That's the inheritance that really matters, not the money, but the model of how to be a decent human being in an indecent world." The evening ended with everyone helping to clean up, CEOs and janitors working side by side to fold tables and pick up trash. As the last car pulled away, Sarah and I stood in my driveway looking at the stars that were barely visible through the light pollution of the suburbs. "What now?" she asked, leaning against the Honda that had become her regular car, having sold her Toyota and donated the money to the Veterans App development. "Now we keep going," I said. "Keep investing in people. Keep seeing potential where others see problems. Keep remembering that the most valuable things in life aren't things at all." 2 years have passed since that night when I walked into Teknova's party and changed everything with my presence. Sarah is married now to that veteran whose app has helped thousands of other veterans find resources and support. They live in a modest apartment, drive used cars, and measure their wealth in the lives they touch rather than the money they make. She's CEO of Teknova's social impact division, turning down offers from Google and Apple to stay where she can make a difference. She still brings lunch in Tupperware, still shops at thrift stores, still takes the time to really see people rather than positions. I'm still the mystery investor to most of the world, though the mystery has been solved for those who matter. My portfolio has grown to over $300 million, but I still live in the same house, drive the same car, wear the same simple clothes. The money isn't mine, really. It's just temporarily under my management until I can find the right dreams to invest it in, the right people to believe in, the right problems to solve. Sarah understands that now, understands that wealth is a tool, not a goal, a means to lift others, not a measure of your own worth. Last week, she called me with news. "Mom, I'm pregnant," she said, and I could hear the joy and fear mixed in her voice. "And I'm terrified I'm going to mess this kid up, that I'm going to teach them the wrong values or lose sight of what matters." I laughed, remembering my own fears when I was pregnant with her, wondering how I would raise a child alone, how I would teach her to be good in a world that rewarded being ruthless. "You'll mess up," I told her honestly. "You'll make mistakes, probably big ones. But if you love that child more than you love yourself, if you show them through your actions what really matters, if you let them fail and learn and grow into their own person, you'll do just fine. Will you help me?" she asked, and I could hear the little girl in her voice, the one who used to ask me to check for monsters under her bed. "Always," I promised. "But remember, the best help I can give is sometimes to step back and let you figure it out yourself. That's how you become the parent your child needs. Not by following someone else's playbook, but by writing your own." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "I want my child to grow up knowing both sides, the successful grandmother and the simple one, the investor and the woman who clips coupons, the extraordinary hidden in the ordinary. I want them to know from the start what took me 23 years to learn. And that's the real inheritance I'm leaving. Not the money, though that will help, but the understanding that true wealth has nothing to do with bank accounts and everything to do with character. That success isn't about impressing strangers, but about being able to sleep peacefully knowing you've lived according to your values. That the most ordinary-looking person might be extraordinary in ways you can't imagine. So treat everyone with respect and curiosity. That hiding your truth to protect someone else often causes more harm than good. That love isn't about giving your children everything, but about giving them the tools to build their own everything." The Honda finally died last month, after 300,000 miles and 25 years of faithful service. Sarah insisted on being there when it was towed away, actually cried as it disappeared down the street. "That car taught me more than any BMW ever could," she said, wiping her eyes. "It taught me that reliability matters more than appearance, that getting there is more important than how you look getting there, that some things have value that can't be measured in dollars." We bought another used Honda, 10 years old with a few dings and scratches, and Sarah drove it off the lot with more pride than she'd ever shown in her luxury cars. Technova is now valued at $5 billion, and my stake is worth more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. But the real value is in the 10 million children using our educational platform for free, the 1,000 employees who own stock options that will secure their futures, the 100 other startups we're incubating through our social impact program. Sarah runs that program with the same values her father would have admired, choosing mission over margin, impact over income, purpose over profit. She's become the person I always knew she could be, not because I told her who to be, but because I let her discover it for herself, even when that journey led through darkness and shame. Every Thursday, I still have my book club, though now Sarah knows it's really board meetings and strategy sessions. Sometimes she joins me, sitting in my home office as we review proposals and discuss investments. We look for the same things, not just profitable ideas but transformative ones, not just smart founders but good humans, not just financial returns but social impact. We've become partners in the truest sense, not because we share DNA but because we share values, vision, and the understanding that the best investment you can make is in another human being's potential. The story that began with my daughter hiding her face in shame has become one of redemption, growth, and the power of truth. She no longer hides from me or from herself. She stands tall in her thrift store clothes and drives her used Honda with pride, knowing that her worth isn't in what she owns, but in who she is. And I stand beside her, no longer hidden, no longer mysterious, just a mother who loved her daughter enough to let her fail, learn, and ultimately choose to be better. Friends, if you've made it this far in our story, you've witnessed something beautiful. The transformation that happens when we stop measuring worth by the wrong metrics and start seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary. You've seen that money is just a tool, that success without character is failure, and that the most valuable inheritance you can leave your children isn't cash, but character. If this story touched your heart, if it made you think differently about success and value, Please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video if you believe that true wealth is measured in kindness, integrity, and impact, rather than dollars. Comment below with your own stories of discovering what really matters, of learning to see past the surface to the soul beneath. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge us to be better, to see clearer, and to value what truly matters in this brief, precious life we're given. Remember, you might be sitting next to an extraordinary person disguised as an ordinary one, so treat everyone with the respect and curiosity they deserve. Until next time, this is Miranda and Sarah, reminding you that the best investment you can make is in becoming the person your children can be proud of, not for what you own, but for who you are.